Okay, so in a moment when so many uncertainties about the near future are being raised, and we are all being called to reflect on what matters and in what we can do, Junho in Portugal decided to challenge some top professionals from different sectors, most of them partners and associates, or even members of the team, the large network of JAs around the world, to help us understand how education and entrepreneurship in particular are evolving in this context and how key they can be on designing a better world for all. Every Friday at 6 p.m., we invite one person to go a bit deeper on a specific topic. And our today's topic is entrepreneurial education in Europe, in which Junior Achievement Europe and all of its member nations play a very significant role, not only because of the enormous impact we have as an organization. We impact around 4.2 million young people in Europe every year, but also because of the privileged relations we have with the European Union and the European Commission in particular. And that is also why we challenge Salvatore Nigro, the recently nominated CEO of JA Europe, to have a talk with us about what is happening with education and in particular entrepreneurial education all around Europe. How is the current situation we are all living affecting the living forces of education systems all around Europe? How does entrepreneurship and the skill sets it provides help us go through these hard times in a, VUCA society? What can we expect to happen in the upcoming times of economic negative externalities arising from this health crisis? But we will also talk about JA Europe and how we have been dealing with the necessary adaptation to the current situation, and also about the CEO CoYC, the Company of the Year competition 2020, which is one of the biggest European events of JA Europe, and will be hosted this year by Junior Achievement Portugal on a digital multi-platform event from the 22nd to the 24th of July. Before coming to JA Europe and embracing this big challenge of leading the way to build different ways of expanding and enhancing entrepreneurial education, Salvatore spent 12 years at Education for Employment, EFE, and as CEO of EFE Europe and Vice President of EFE Global, Salvatore led EFE's business development, partnership, and program management in Europe to support operations in the Middle East and North Africa. He previously was director of the International Partnerships and Advocacy Department of the G Local Forum and worked at the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Of Italian origin, born in the south of Italy, Salvatore holds an MBA from the University of Malta, an M&A in International Strategic and Military Studies, and an MA in International Political Science from Lewis University. He was born in Calabria in 1979. Sorry, Salvatore, I had to reveal your age. I'm sorry. This 4.5 languages speaker, Portuguese not included, shame on you, Salvatore.
That's why I'm here.
Shame on you.
That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here.
Describes himself as being energetic and passionate, and he channels these characteristics to empowering young people to succeed. He is also a specialist in multi-stakeholder partnerships and in creating common grounds for collaboration works between different people and different sectors. Being Italian, we could almost risk saying that he's our own Pope for entrepreneurial education in Europe. Oh. Salvatore, now it's my turn to speak your language.
Okay.
Benvenuto in questo spazio di conversazione e grazie per aver dedicato un po' del tuo prezioso tempo a discutere alcune delle questioni più rilevanti per l'organizzazione su cui lavoriamo entrambi. Welcome,
Obrigado. Well, you see, obrigado, Fred. Obrigado. Well, I did so many things in life Probably I'm getting too old that I forgot many of those. But thank you so much for reminding all of those to me. Thank you so much for inviting me to Junior Achievement Portugal Friday Talks. I've been watching your previous one. I'm thrilled to know the next one, but you made a big mistake today by inviting me here. So thank you so much. Thank you so
Let's see how that goes.
much.
And we know you like challenges. And by the way, we haven't rehearsed this, okay? Salvatore doesn't have a clue what expects him. Okay, so be very much afraid, Salvatore.
I think like everybody likes surprises, right? Who doesn't like surprises? Who doesn't like surprises? I
This
like
talk,
surprises. We didn't rehearse them.
let's see how you react to the surprises I'm prepared for you.
Okay.
This talk is not only to know more about entrepreneurial education, but to push you a bit, provoke you a bit, so we can reach a more deep level of knowledge about yourself and, of course, your point of view. And talking about challenges and provocations, we usually start these conversations with some icebreaker questions so we can know some more about Salvatore, the
All right.
person, and not so much about the role you play as JA Europe CEO.
First of all, you can ever have enough pizza and pasta, especially if it's a good one. It's like telling you, oh, you have enough for pastéis de Belém. Come on. But you can never get up there, not even if you get 150 kilos fat. It's impossible to get rid of it. Because I think that I always had this mind, a global mind. I always had this global mind since I was a kid. So I thank always Italy for having providing me with so many opportunities. I am a product of the educational system in Italy, but I saw myself when I was young. We were so ambitious as the young entrepreneurs to which we teach every year a junior achievement in Europe, in which we reach 4.2 million young kids in 40 European countries. They have to they are the ones who really have great vision about the futures, and they cannot be boundaries cannot limit their creativity, cannot limit the innovation. So I started very early traveling. I lived in Norway instead. I spent a considerable amount of time in the United States, in sub-Saharan Africa, in citizen conflict and post-conflict, in the Middle East and North Africa. Then love and work brought me to Spain originally. I'm in the southeast of Spain, in Murcia. So just on the other side where you are in Lisbon. So we're really facing it on the two sides. I'm looking at the Mediterranean, and you're looking at the Atlantic out there. But Italy is always in my heart. It will always be in my heart, and I will always be proud of being an Italian, but with a vision of an open world.
Are you going back when you get old? I mean, in 40 years old time, of course, because he's still very young.
You never know where life brings you there. I mean, I definitely spend my holidays in Italy. This is for sure. I still have family and friends, which I grew up to. But when you grow up in the poorest region of Italy, which is Calabria, as you rightly mentioned it, it helps you also forge your resilience to become the fighter that you want to see as entrepreneurs, out there. That you have a lot of challenges, but you also look at what's next. You can't just stop. You can't just stop there. And this is what I did. Being born myself from a very humble family, my mother was 16 years old. My father was 20 years old. They both were unemployed in a rural area where youth unemployment rate was huge, high. So but my mother told me at that time, Fred, Salvatore, you have to think big. You don't get a no as an answer, and you give back. Those are the three things that have been really my leitmotif across the years. And someone has believed, as I do, that talent is universal, but opportunities are not, and gave me the opportunity to provide a little bit of my skills to allow others now to change the world. They lived in different and you know, played in different time of history. It's like comparing Pelé with Baggio with Ronaldo. They all lived in different times. So soccer was also different, right? Football was also different during this age. I think both of them, you have the creativity of Baggio from one side, and you had the strength that Cristiano is able to show. And this is something that we also need to have from our entrepreneurs. Now, that being strong like Cristiano when he gets out there, but also being creative like Baggio to paint the future. Strategy, in reality, the strategy of an organization, being a profit or not profit. I mean, when you think about strategy, you also think about military studies, because it starts there. I mean, there is the big schools of thought about strategy. Then you apply it to different sectors, and you apply it to different way of living it. But if you go back also on history, you need to have and focus on the strategy. No port is safe for the salesman who doesn't. No wind is favorable to the salesman who doesn't know to which port to arrive. And if you want to really understand to which port you want to arrive, you need to have a good strategy about it. So I applied, and I've been studying through strategic and military studies with many NATO officials on a master in which I was mainly dealing with civil-military cooperation in areas of crisis. And that has a lot to do especially with the not-for-profit that have a key and fundamental role, organization have a key and fundamental role, so also rebuilding fragile states, right? So also in these cases, the civil-military cooperation is fundamental to restart, especially in cities in conflict and post-conflict, in countries in conflict and post-conflict, which is a little bit of the background I had many years ago. But I always linked it also with the other part, which is the part of diplomacy. I mean, when I studied international relations, in fact, and as international relations, I mean, I believe in the power of diplomacy, in this soft power to convince the others. I applied that learnings into how can we select some really high objective. You need to think big, as my mother said, right? And you want to achieve it. So how you can inspire those young entrepreneurs to really think big. If you really want to change the world, you cannot change it. You cannot just think of change it small and small. You really need to think big. And this is what I try to apply for my studies and my careers. You know, before joining EFE, my previous organization, I was working for an organization called the Global Forum. And there you have really the answer, which is global and local. You cannot think that it's just a top-down approach can work for everyone. It has to be contextualized to the level of each one of the level of innovation also that each individual system is able to absorb, because otherwise it can easily crash. And what we saw with the COVID-19 pandemics, also in this case, we saw that in some countries, it was also through the adoption of digital means, the educational paths have not been so disrupted, but in some other countries, there has been a significant alienation, the significant disruption in the educational path in general, and also the entrepreneurial education in different countries. So it has to be a coordinated effort. What is good at the global level is definitely to make some comparisons so people can learn about of who others are doing. But if we think that we can just have an approach that works for all, in that case, no. What we need to be as an objective is to prepare the young people for the world of work and enter the labor market and enter the world that will come. So we need to start preparing in each one of the countries really the young people, our children, for jobs that still do not exist. And we need to have a lot of utilizing data, definitely, as much as we can, predicting through our model. There are some very good examples about it. And this will also help our entrepreneurs, understanding in which sectors they need to invest and which assets and how they can have access to human capital. Because, often we teach young people on how they need to access to credit and access to capital. But also when you become an entrepreneur, you also need to have access to human capital, to the talent that you will need for your company to grow. And this one, the educational system should be able to support you in that by providing skilled employee in that case. Look, when entering into any kind of collaborative efforts, organization and also member states have to understand that not only there are benefits, but there is also a price to pay. And the price that you have to pay is the price of change and the resistance to change that you will have from your internal stakeholders. The main issue in this moment is that there are too many of resistances of people who have been there for too long that are not making that step ahead because they believe that changing the status quo, they might lose their relative added value to the system. So in each one of the member countries. So some understanding and entering that embracing change into the educational system, making reforms, educational reforms, will definitely, it's needed to do it, but the levels, it is a change of mindset and a change of people mindset before changing of the content itself. I want to give you an example. A few years ago, in a country, I'm not going to mention which country it was, I was with the Ministry of Youth. Okay, and we were thinking it about launching a national initiative about youth. The problem that the ministry was recently appointed told me is, no, Salvatore, this looks good on paper, but I have a big problem here. And the main problem is that 70% of the employees of the Ministry of Youth were over 55 years old. So how can you think that you can be close to your relevant stakeholders, which are the young people who are the main beneficiaries, when you only have the majority of the people in your systems that are not ready to make those changes? You will need to upskill them first, and then you can really skill the young people about it. And the framework has been developed already also at the European level, in which we have collaborated about it in entrepreneurial education. The issue is the following: why you want to structure it that in a certain way? You want to structure it because otherwise it becomes too loose and people lose their attention about it. So also those who want to implement educational reforms do not take it into consideration because it becomes too loose. Instead, as we said in the strategy, we need to focus. And if we want to focus and we want to create this ambition, we want to really know and we want to call it with a name and a surname. Now, is entrepreneurial education only for entrepreneurs? No. Is everybody who goes through that need to become an entrepreneur? No. Does it have to have the skills of an entrepreneur? Yes. Why? Because when you are an entrepreneur, let's talk about it. When you're an entrepreneur, why MBA? Everybody wants to do an MBA. Because an MBA gives you 360 degrees of your company, right? HR, management, strategy, operations, finance, marketing, and so on and so forth. It teaches also you soft skills that you needed. So when you want to become entrepreneur, you need to have all those skills that you build up. You have to have soft skills and you need to have technical skills. But today, even if you work for a company, any employer of the world want flexibility, adaptability, creative thinking, problem solving. Are these not the quality that any entrepreneur has? Is it not the fact that you need to know that you have challenges, whether you are an entrepreneur or you're an employee, but even if you fail, you can do it better, you will succeed about it? It is. So all of those, let's say the different elements that creates the different competencies that are included into the entrepreneurship education are valid both for entrepreneurs and also not for entrepreneurs. More and more, also because the labor market is changing it. I mean, we're not looking also at jobs that are there for all your life in which you apply, but there are also different ways in which the contractual relations between the employers and the employees, or the self-employed person who provides services to the employers, is changing. More and more what we are experiencing is that many people are becoming self-employed and providing services to different companies. So it changes the contractual relations in many cases. So this is already one reason for we need to make sure that those who now before were employees, but that today are working as self-entrepreneur, providing services or goods to another companies, have those skills. Otherwise, they cannot succeed in life. But on the other side, also those who become entrepreneurs, the companies are they value much more. Number one is really the ambition that an entrepreneur has, and being ambitious, it's not necessarily, many people define this as a bad thing. I don't think that an ambition, which is a nice ambition, you have to have the ambition. Where do you want to go? Who do you want to be? And helps also in the employability path, not of this is the job of today, but this is the career path in which where I want to get. So if you have that entrepreneurial mind, that in 10 years, even in the company, you want to arrive there, you'll work hard, you continue investing into your skills to get to that level. And companies value this very much. I mean, in both models, you continue to repeat the word learn, learn, learn. So whether you learn before or you learn afterwards, but you have to have a growth mindset and an open mindset to learn, to absorb. Then it is important in which time of your life you're going to do it, you're going to test it, you're going to challenge it, you're going to face, you're going to fail, and then you're going to do it. But we also have cases of entrepreneurs who started the first time and where they were successful already. I mean, it's true. Many, you have to fail many times to get it because it's a learning process. But you have to have someone who also inspires you and tells you that it's okay to fail or not. Otherwise, at the first failure, you're out. I mean, if you don't have someone who really tells you, Fred, well, don't worry. I mean, this happens. It's part of the business. And it's so important that, because in many of our society, the failure of the idea, of the entrepreneurial idea, is too much associated with the failure of the entrepreneur. This need to be dissociated. This need to be dissociated. It's not the entrepreneur, it's not the person who's failing. That idea is failing. Okay? The entrepreneur will make sure that either the same idea with tweaks or a different idea will succeed. But someone has to put the basics. Someone has to tell the young people that their future is not only to have a stable job and what they want, they does not incentivize inspiration, creativity, change. Look, at the end of the day, we as entrepreneurs, what do we want to do? We really want to change things. I mean, I associate it so much with the change that people want to do, because otherwise you're just repeating it what the others do. But the best entrepreneur, what they did, they always wanted to change. They are questioning the status quo. And yes, you have it as an inspiration. But if you have a guide to do that, wouldn't it be better? Number one, never waste a good crisis. Someone said, and I still recognize, never waste a good crisis. Number two, in the path of innovation in general, and it's also in the change of educational reforms in the innovations, you have the S curve, right, of the innovation. It's an S curve. Now, this is innovating. To me, in this moment, we really need to move to the next S curve. We can't continue on the same S curve. We're just shifting up there on the next S curve. In order to jump on the other S curve, we need to invent it. Because if we want to just play with the margin of this S curve, it will be too tight. I agree with you. It will be too tight. And why? Because we should not waste the crisis, but we have wasted a lot of time until now in talking and limiting it. Right, I agree with you on the strategy, and then the problems went down into the operations and putting it into. So now today we really need to move to the next S curve of innovation on so many things. We need to invent it, and then we have enough margin. But how can we enter that? I can tell you that if many of the people who are decision makers out there would have that entrepreneurial mindset of really challenging the status quo, we would have been already up there on the S curve. Well, Fred, when you talked about personal things, right? And I was telling you, when I was a kid, all my classmates, they wanted to become astronaut because they wanted to go to the moon. I wanted to become an archaeologist. So I wanted to go in the past. And why that? Because I was always thinking that if I really want to design the future, I need to look at the past.
True.
And if I want to reach really the moon, I have to have my feet well solid into the ground. And this is what is JA. JA has its feet solid into the ground, which is in the past of 100 years of successes, also of mistakes, also of experiences. But we've been able to bring to millions of young people in many, many countries across the world this entrepreneurial spirit, work readiness spirit, financial literacy spirit. So are we old? Are we wise? Yes, we are old and wise. But it's not where we are today that defines you. It's where you're going to be tomorrow. And we will be in a much better shape as a world if there are not only a bigger JA, but many others JA that do the work that we do. Well, one of the first things, and was also as a reaction, I'll give you concrete examples, as a reaction also of the COVID-19, in which we made it available not only to all of our member organization, but also to the world out there on Keep Learning. If you go on the JA Worldwide website, Keep Learning, it's a fantastic resource base of different programs that can be some very, I can use it for with my son directly, and maybe Spain doesn't have it, but Argentina has developed it. So I can also get it here from my son based in Spain. So these are definitely the good things that we share among all of the members of JA, but also with external that are interested to do it and interested to apply. We all know that we have a very integrated senior leadership team with the different regions in which we are able to learn whatever we're doing. We have initiatives that goes across the different geographies. In the COVID-19 response itself, it was so important to see. We had some experiences that were coming from China because they were the first one who were affected, and then in Europe from Italy, and Italy then to Spain, that we were being able to share how the organization were reacting to that, how we should have not lost track and lose contact with our beneficiaries, our schools that were in a very difficult moment. Now summer is coming, and the human being tend to forget the bad things. But just 3 months ago, we should not forget that. Just 3 months ago, the majority of the countries of the world were in lockdown. All of our kids were at home with their parents, trying to see how could we even connect to work or connect to schools in order to don't have too much of a disruption with the external world. And I think JA has given, you talk about it, oh, you are 100 years old. Yeah, we're 100 years old. Thanks to that, we've been continuing being in contact with all of our members, with different educational institutions, with all of our partners to move together. It was a global challenge. It is a global challenge. It needs a collective response. The way of structuring the learnings, for instance, we've been leveraging in many countries, for instance, Microsoft Teams as a way not only of working remotely, because the first things we needed to put safe, it was our staff, obviously, and in order then to operations to continue. And then some countries have been leveraged quite a lot Microsoft Teams, and has been able to teach. We had a lot of webinars that we've been teaching and transferring that knowledge not only among staff but also with the educational institutions, with the continuation of the work with some of our volunteers that obviously also them they could not visit the schools were closed. So also in that case is our volunteers, and I have to praise and thank all of them because they really stepped up. They understood that the situation was difficult. And so the same word volunteering is okay, then I take care only of myself. In this moment, I'm locked down myself. Why I am supporting an organization like JA, why I'm supporting, I want to continue to provide support to the young people that in which have created their mini company, in which they have created their startup. And we, virtualization of events. Our business it is, especially in Europe, when we talk about Europe, our business is definitely in the learning, but then it's also in the competitions itself, on the best entrepreneurial idea, right? So next week, we are going to have the European Enterprise Challenge hosted in Greece. And guess what? In a month from now, more or less, some few days more, we are going to have the 31st JA Europe Company of the Year competition, where we have 40 teams, 40 countries that are competing. And those young people put so much energy since the last September. into creating a mini company. And you know better than I do, because you were direct in contact with all of them and you saw their passion. We would have never forgive us the fact that we would have canceled our 31st JA Europe Company of the Year competition. We own it to them first than owning it to ourselves. We own it to them. We definitely owe it to them, and I'm glad that we will be virtually in Portugal in a month from now to celebrate the best entrepreneurial idea among those 40 teams. It does, and it's sad. It does, and it is very sad, Fred, because at the end of the day, every crisis that we go through, they're always the same who pay the price. And quite, in all honesty, that's not fair. It's not fair for the world in which we live in. So we're talking about educational disruptions, and those young people, those children who were not lucky enough to have at their home even an internet connection or a laptop to which to connect, their educational path has been even more disrupted. We cannot forget that. If there is a lesson from this crisis, is that we cannot increase this gap among those who have and those who have less. And it is important for us, it's a moral duty, not only as a JA leader as leaders of JA, but as citizens. We have to make sure that those things will not happen again. And this is why, in the way I'm also imagining more and more the activities of junior achievement, is a significant focus on creating economic opportunities for those who do not have. Now, the problem is, we all know, some educational system by themselves were not prepared at all. They did not have the possibility to connect with their young people, and more importantly, with their children. So digital education is here to stay. Yes, it is here to stay, because we're moving to that S curve. When you make those jumps, it's almost impossible that you can go back, because the resistance to change, given it was made in the emergency phase, the resistance to change was minimum compared to would have been if there was not that crisis. So that's a good thing from that point of view. The issue is that there were not enough tools, not enough infrastructures, not enough skilled people that were able to utilize those tools for those young people. Now, talking back to some example, I'm sure you in Portugal had many great examples, and you focus on many of those young people. Give you an example here in Spain with your colleagues, with Blanca Narvaez, in which they've been focusing on daycare centers and orphanages, providing them with tablets, providing them with internet connection. Think about some of those centers in which you have 15, 20 children that do not have internet connections. Then you have just a day caretaker, which is not a teacher, that had to deal with 15 people, 15 young people, 24/7 during the lockdown. I mean, that's an enormous disruption. So really, our organization, and I can list many other examples, that really stepped up, have really stepped up in this crisis, also to go to the more disadvantaged. In the other side, well, before that, junior achievement in Europe, also thanks to different grant, EAC from the Nordic countries, we've been focusing on needs. Now, you know how difficult it was to, the dropout of schools was still very high. The issue is that you can continue engage it in a presential way, those young people, to continue the educational path. When you move it to do digital so in a way that is so abrupt, you risk that you cannot have that motivational factors to keep the young people into the educational systems. And when you don't are in the educational systems, and when you do not have job opportunity, you are in that limbo that your motivation goes completely down. So thanks to this grant in 5 different countries, we also have been working a lot with needs and great experiences. Or I give you some examples. In Italy, we've been working on the refugee and migrant populations as well. And your colleagues over there have done a tremendous job in continuing pushing on entrepreneurial education and work readiness in financial literacy. Now, the fact that now we are in this crisis, it doesn't mean that we need to learn from that, right? So it's been a failure. Yes, it has been a failure as the world, that we still continue to have those situations. But it's the right moment to really invest significantly into allowing each and one of the young people to don't suffer this disruption. Well, we said at the beginning the 3 advices of my mother, right? And think big, don't get a no as an answer. So I answer to all your questions. See, I'm not saying I'm not answering to these questions or the other one. But also the other one that then defined also my life. I've always been working for organizations who have an impact in society, and is to give back. So our alumni, and we have some very successful alumni, and we're very proud of them. They're giving it back. They're giving back time, they're giving back effort, and they're giving back to society also by creating job themselves. And this is so important. So the advice I give it to them, number one, continue to be in contact through the different JA alumni association and the JA Alumni Europe Association. It's simply great. I mean, their stories are fantastic. Their events, unfortunately this year also we couldn't do it in person, so I'm gonna postpone it for next year. But it's a way of networking, and it's not one of those alumni as Donald, the president, saying, which you have old people out there, they're just no. We love those ones, but it's also very energetic associations of alumni, where also business can be forged itself to create more. Because if one creates 5 jobs and the other one creates other 5 jobs, maybe together and creating a joint venture, they're not creating 10, they're going to create 15 jobs, and this is going to help us to grow. The other things is also those ones who are very successful out there. And when we are only in Europe, we have 4.2 million every year of beneficiaries, right? So think about how many we have gone throughout the years. It's so important in the way they can be first investors in the idea of the newcomers. So you have your company, you already have your company out there, it is created, it is successful. Why don't you think of investing into the one who's getting out of the mini company program of the 31st JA Europe Company of the Year competition of JA Portugal this year? I mean, think about it. We already, you tasted the product because you are the product of it. It inspired you. You know how worth it is. So those young people who went through regional finals, national finals, come to European finals, and someone is saying, this is the best entrepreneurial idea among 355,000 entrepreneurs who came out there. Someone is worth investing, isn't it? And why don't we keep it into the family and have the alumni investing into those? I still remember that call, Fred, me and you saying, what do we do? Shall we keep it? Shall we not keep it? And those are the difficult decisions that you need to make, right? I mean, canceling in person, but already having the plan of, and if we didn't have that strategy at this point, we couldn't have planned. So the partners were very empathetic with the situations. They put themselves in our shoes. And you can really say that we are lucky at JA. We are lucky because many of those partners do not believe in what we do. They believe in why we do it. And our why is their why. So they really focus and continue to grow the partnership because it's a partnership based on values. So the way you do the things, the what and the how, then is secondary to the fact whether it's virtual, it's presential, we change the date, we do it. But the why was we need to reward those young people who put so much sacrifice in creating their mini companies. And all of them, they said, yes, maybe some say, well, we also need to support causes as it is normal related to the health emergency. And they had to shift part of the funding, some of this, but they have to set the large, and it's also understandable. It is also completely understandable. And we as an organization, we cannot think that we are the only one who are saving the world. No, there are many initiatives out there that are worth it and deserve all of our big applause. But they were really understandable because they really love the organization. They really love the ideas of our young people. They feel inspired. It's rewarding for their employees. It's rewarding for their volunteers as well. It would have been a loss not only for the youth, but also for the volunteers who have accompanied, in many cases, our youth to create their mini company. Our achievement in Europe reached 4.2 million children and youth every year through work readiness, entrepreneurship, and financial literacy. 355,000 of them this year have competed for the best entrepreneurial idea 16 years old and plus in 40 different countries. We believed that even with the educational disruptions, even with the challenges, if those young people have been able to get to this moment, they deserve my attention. I believe they deserve also your attention. So don't miss the event.
In JA, we are fostering the capacity to create the future every day, all around the world, impacting 10 million young women and men every year. We strongly believe that the set of skills we are providing to these young people will definitely increase the odds of having a better world for all in the forthcoming global challenges period. In Europe in particular, as we could understand from this conversation, much is being already done. But of course, we are aware that there is still a lot to do. We count on each school, each teacher, each student, stake and shareholder to help us lead the way and find new innovative ways to have a greater impact. These talks are just another way to share many different people's views and insights. This week, we had the privilege to talk to Salvatore. Salvatore, ti ringraziamo ancora una volta per essere qui e ti auguriamo tutto il meglio in questa nuova missione che hai abbracciato con JA Europe.
Grazie mille Fred.
Next week,
grazie a tutti voi. Ci vediamo presto in Portogallo.
Next week, we are going to have João Marques da Costa, the Portuguese Government Secretary of State for Education, and we will be talking, of course, about the Portuguese education system and the many challenges we are facing now. Do not listen to this talk in a moment when we are all concerned about our children's education and the next steps for the upcoming month with all the uncertainties we are living now. It's going to happen on 26th of June at 6 p.m. as always on Junho Portugal Facebook page. By the way, take 10 seconds of your time to become a follower of the page and join us on this amazing task of changing our children's future for better. Thank you all for being here. Ciao Salvatore, grazie e ci vediamo.
Un abbraccio a tutti.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Obrigado a todos. Boa tarde.